the special forces of the Navy, of the Indian Navy. It's called the Marcos, whose job was to dive deep and investigate Dwarka.
This was identified by Balagangadhar Tilak. 100 years ago, he's been talking about it. Dwarka's shape of the harbour and everything seems to be similar to what is found here. 22,000 to 18,000 years ago, Earth went through an ice age, and this ice age is called last glacial maximum, and this resulted in so much of water locked up in ice that the shorelines are visible far beyond where they are today.
Draw out a picture of the Ice Age for people who've not seen the animated movie.
Earlier ice ages were even more severe, even beyond the Himalayas, maybe up to New Delhi and others. Maybe we had ice ages over here. In 2050, we could have water levels. Chennai could be submerged. Kolkata and Bangladesh, many places could be submerged. Mumbai also could suffer a lot of submergence events.
Would you like to bring in astrology?
There is no such thing as astrology. We only had Jyotisha. Indians could mark the passage of time merely by looking at where is the moon against which backdrop of star is that. This is fantastic.
I don't know why I'm getting goosebumps, but I'm getting goosebumps. And I remember my mum reading out the story to me from the comic book. And then I asked her, are these people, are these aliens? And she didn't really have an answer. And I remember my question mark just stopping there. Cut to 2023 and I've got my answer. That these are celestial events encapsulated in stories. The stories traveled from 7,000 BC.
Yes, 9,000 years to present
2001 when I read that Amar Chitra Katha comic book. And this is one story. How many other stories are relaying how much of our past?
Absolutely. These stories are woven intentionally to encode knowledge.
There's a lot to be decoded in the Vedas.
Precisely.
Done so many episodes on Indian history, on Indian culture, on what people call mythology, which is an offensive word for so many Indians. This particular podcast contains all of these topics and much more because it's centered around astronomy as well. The science of our solar system. How our solar system is linked to Indian culture, how our ancients discovered secrets about astronomy. If you're someone who enjoys all these cultural conversations, you're going to enjoy this one. But trust me, I feel every Indian should watch this podcast because this is the true deep history of our land, the ancient history of our land before 10,000 BC. Lots of different topics have been addressed in this one. Had a lot of fun recording this. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of fun listening to this special conversation with Raj Vedam. How are you, Raj Vedam, sir?
I'm very fine. Thank you, Ranveer. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's a privilege too to be on your show. So thank you for inviting me.
Appreciate your presence here, sir. You do a bunch of things. That's what I find the most fascinating about you. Began as an engineer, you did your doctorate. Now you've kind of dedicated your life to unearthing the hidden history of India. There's a lot of people who would have heard this first sentence itself and switched off because according to a lot of people, you need to be a historian to be able to talk about this. After doing more than like 550 episodes, I've realized that knowledge is gained when there's curiosity for the knowledge to be gained. And as long as you're following the techniques that historians follow, you're doing a just job. But of course, there will be people who will switch off anyway. So this podcast is for everyone else who's willing to be open, who's willing to learn.
Outstanding, outstanding. See, there's a tendency to be, for people to be gatekeeping. Gatekeeping in the sense that, how are you credentialed to do this kind of thing? Often I tell them, I'm an engineer. I'm interested in knowing what were the contributions of my ancestors to science and technology. Who else is better qualified than an engineer to investigate this? I don't expect a sociologist or a historian to understand development, growth in math and things like that. Yeah. So this is what I do. I studied, research this.
I'd almost go as far as saying sometimes the standard traditional degrees almost box your mind a little bit.
Right.
Sometimes, not always.
Right. If we have a tendency to be boxed in with the constraints we have, and very difficult for us to break those boxes and go outside. So sometimes an outsider perspective is quite interesting.
Let's talk about astronomy and
okay, all right.
The sciences a little more.
Right.
What would you like to say about it?
Okay.
Would you like to bring in astrology as well?
There is no such thing as astrology. We only had Jyotisha. We only had Jyotisha, which is intricate observation of the skies with mathematics, understanding movement of the heavenly bodies and other such things. Indians were intellectually so curious they have tried just about everything. So even in astronomy, they have tried to see how can I understand movements of the heavenly skies and peg it to life on Earth. As the cosmos, so in the microcosm also, right? They've tried ideas of this nature. People have tried to see cycles in nature, cycles in life. We go through night and day cycles and things of that
Where
nature.
is all this?
Where is all this? What do you mean?
Like, where have they written these things about whatever's up there is also down here?
This has been the recurrent theme throughout Indian writings and history, if you will. So throughout it has been that they look to the skies for inspiration, and so also below over here, as in the sky in the cosmos, so over here. This is a recurrent theme wherever you see. This is the kind of theme that happens, and so if you want to talk about Indian astronomy itself, we have to go to pretty ancient times. Initially, Indians observed the heavenly bodies, all the movement of the heavenly bodies and so on, and they tried to make sense of it. They tried to remember it, and they evolved that into stories. They made a bunch of stories about it. So, encoding of wisdom into stories. One such story, early story, was Chandra married the 27 daughters of King Daksha. So that is the story that they made, and promptly sent a whole lot of people tittering to laughter, saying, "What nonsense! Chandra is anthropomorphic, the moon. There's no such thing. He's not a man, and how can he marry 27 women?" But the point is, it concealed wisdom which people intended to convey. Every day, our ancestors observed the moon would rise in the eastern horizon at a slightly different time, and if it is evening time, you can make out what is a star in the background, right? So if today it rises at 8 p.m., tomorrow it might rise at 8:40, right? Sometime offset is over there. And therefore, it is against a different backdrop of stars every day. And they notice it takes 27 days approximately for the moon to come back to the same backdrop of stars. So they divided the entire ecliptic into 27 segments. And it's not enough to just divide it, right? You should also recognize it. So they tried to see what is the principal brightest star in each of these 27 segments, and they gave it a name. And mnemonic was the wives of the moon. By knowing the stories of the nakshatras, I might be able to tell you what will follow what will follow what. In other words, you have an intricate map of the skies through stories. The stories tell you what's going to come next and so on. So Indians could mark the passage of time merely by looking at where is the moon against which backdrop of star is that. Each of these segments is called a nakshatra. So it is presumed that moon would visit one wife each day, a lunar mansion, if you will. Like, for example, at 10 o'clock today, if the moon is somewhere over there in the sky, tomorrow at 10 o'clock, you go and see where the moon is, it'll have fallen behind by 13 and one-third degrees. So this is the understanding. In a 24-hour period, it covers 13 and one-third degrees. So this is what our ancestors did. They initially observed these cycles, encoded them into stories. So this is one such story. The story says that Chandra loved Rohini more than the others, one of the wives, and his father-in-law Daksha got furious with him. How can you treat my daughters unequally and so on? He curses him, "You're going to die." Chandra doesn't want to die. He runs out to Mahadeva. "Please, Mahadeva, I don't want to die." Mahadeva says, "I can't remove the curse, but I'll alleviate it. As you die, eventually you'll grow in strength once again, and once again you'll fade away and die." So this part of the story is remembering the phases of the moon. So the moon goes from Amavasya to Paurnami back to Amavasya. It takes 29.5 days approximately to do that. So Indians clearly understood that we had a sidereal month, which is 27 days, a nakshatra-based model, and a 29.5 days synodic month based on the tithi of the moon and so on. And they also understood Uttarayana and Dakshinayana. It means the movement of the moon northwards takes 6 months, and the movement of the moon southwards, which takes another 6 months. In this peregrination, the moon goes from 23.3 degrees to the north all the way to minus 23.3 degrees to the south. When it goes to the southernmost point, we have winter solstice in the northern hemisphere. So they understood the duration of the year in addition by looking at this phenomena. And it was 365.24 days. So began intellectual developments in India. They
Do you know the book's name or wherever all these records are kept?
These are, for example, in the Puranas. The Matsya Purana talks about Chandra marrying the 27 daughters of King Daksha, about the story of Mahadeva, about fake cursing, all of these kind of things. Uttarayana, Dakshinayana stories come through. For example, there are stories that encode even this phenomena, Uttarayana, Dakshinayana, and so on. That in various Puranas we find these stories. So they try to reconcile the various calendars that I have a solar 365.24 days. I've got a synodic month, 29.5 days. I've got a sidereal month, 27.3 days. So they had to figure out some synchrony between these things to make sense out of it. Initially, Rig Veda said that the year consists of 360 days. One might wonder, what about the remaining 5.24 days? Well, Professor Abhyankar says that they used to have an Atiratra sacrifice in the ancient days when they don't count the passage of time in those 5 days. They do the yajna at that time and it comes back into sync. Then later on in Atharva Veda itself, it says the Rishi called Rohita, he created the Adhika Masa. Adhika Masa is an intercalary month which you insert into the calendar so that you'll have synchrony between the lunar and the solar calendar. You'll have synchrony every 2-3 years. It'll average out to 365.24 days. And the Rishi called Rohita was the one who mathematically figured out what was the way to do it. So we have evidence of these kind of things. Indians were great observers of the skies, trying to impose mathematics on it, trying to get this intellectual fulfillment by trying to reconcile the cycles. All the yoga models that we have, they're all intellectual outgrowths of the synchronizations that we're talking about. So all these things were done. Then we have got in the Rig Veda itself so much of astronomy, various kinds of astronomy. And one of them, it is talking about the Rishi Atri. Rishi Atri is supposed to have observed a solar eclipse. You'll say, big deal, right? I mean, everybody observes solar eclipse. Why would you mention Rishi Atri over there? But the fact is, Balagangadhar Tilak, he translated what was then the Rig Veda, and he said that Atri made use of a device called Turiya Yantra. A Turiya Yantra, he translated to approximately a quadrant. A quadrant is like a protractor, right? You measure angles with it. And you might wonder, what on earth? Why would he use that, right? Well, we know that from, at least from Aryabhata's work onwards, if you take the plane of the sun called the ecliptic, it appears the sun is going around the earth, right? So that plane is called the ecliptic. The path of the moon is offset by 5 degrees.
As in?
The path of the moon, how the moon goes around the earth, is offset by 5 degrees. The geometry, I'm talking about the geometry now, compared to the plane of the sun.
Okay.
Because of that, eclipses can only happen when these two planes coincide. On one side, a solar eclipse can happen. On the other side, a lunar eclipse can happen. And Aryabhatta has explained this beautifully, and is calling this as Rahu and this as Ketu. So this whole business of Rahu and Ketu is explained by Aryabhatta using the mathematics, showing when an eclipse can happen. Now, if you want to predict an eclipse, you got to know the angle between sun and moon. As that angle is coming closer and closer to zero, you can predict an eclipse is going to happen. So it looks like Rishi Atri had this device, which is a Turiya Yantra, like a quadrant kind of device, which obviously measures angles in the sky. He's used that to predict when an eclipse would happen. This is fantastic. It's fantastic because today there are some who are saying Rishi Atri's eclipse is dated to 4750 BCE. Some others says if that is not the one, there's one more in 4202 BCE. These are the kind of time frames that Atri should be dated to on this eclipse information. This means in that time frame, this Rishi has already understood there's an angular relationship between the sun and the moon based on which I can predict when an eclipse will happen. So you have understood the phenomena, you know how to measure it, and you know how to predict it. That is how he's remembered in the Rig Veda, that Rishi Atri was able to predict the solar. I find this mind-blowing that at such an early period of time, Indians had understood the phenomena, the mathematics, predictive capability, and things of this nature. So this is not only one, Ranveer. There's so many instances in the Indian astronomy that typically blows my mind. I'll give you one example. There is something called Aitriya Brahmana. It's associated with the Rig Veda. And in Aitreya Brahmana, in the second chapter, there is a cryptic passage. That passage says the sacrifice, yajna, had gone away from the Devatas. They did not know where it had gone to. So they went to Aditi, the mother of gods, and she said, "Can you help us? Can you help us find it?" She said, "Sure, I'll help you, but I will choose a boon from you." They said, "Sure, go ahead."
A boon.
A boon, a boon.
A boon.
A boon, yes. They said, "Sure, go ahead and ask for it." She said, "All sacrifices will begin and end with me." Very cryptic set of passages which nobody understood. What on earth does it mean? What does it mean? Yajna has gone away. The Devatas were unable to perform any sacrifice. They were in total confusion. They gone to Aditi and begged her. Aditi saying, "Sure, I'll help you, but the sacrifices will begin and end with me." Tilak was the one who recognized this. He said, this is an astronomical phenomena encoded here, showing the great anxiety of our ancestors because they pegged everything to the celestial calendar. They marked all festivals, yajnas, everything based on the celestial clock over there, right? If that celestial clock is out of whack, then I don't know what to do. We will discuss why it will go out of whack. But if it does, and it will, then you don't know when to perform your ceremony. Over a period of 1,000 years or so, your calendars are going to slip because of something called axial precision.
You mean the Earth's axis shifts?
Where the Earth's axis of rotation, right now we are in Mumbai, so it's around 15 degrees, around 15 degrees from the horizon. So it looks like Earth is rotating like this in Mumbai, right? Around 15 degrees. So where it is pointing to is Polaris. That star appears to be immobile in the sky. Earth is rotating from west to east. Therefore, heavenly bodies are going east to west. That's what is happening. But where it is pointing to is slowly tracing a path in the sky. And this takes 26,000 years to complete. Okay? 26,000 years to complete.
You mean the Earth's
axis of rotation,
the Earth is wobbling.
it's wobbling.
Okay.
It's like the analogy I give is like a top. If you play to the top as a child, you tie the string around the top and you twirl it. The top spins very, very fast. But as it is spinning, sometimes it's got a wobble, right? So Earth's fast spin is 24 hours. The slow wobble is 26,000 years. And it is doing this because of the gravitational impact of the sun, moon, and to a lesser extent, Jupiter. That is why Earth is wobbling like this at 26,000 years or so. Why is it important for us? Because we used sidereal astronomy. Sidereal meaning with respect to a nakshatra that is at a certain
What is
point.
the word nakshatra?
Nakshatra. Remember I said that Indians divided the sky, ecliptic, into 27 segments. And they identified a principal brightest star in each segment. They called each of that a nakshatra. So we can identify that with the stars today. For example, Kritika is Pleiades, and Rohini is Aldebaran, and Revati is Zeta Piscium. Like this, we know what these stars are based upon what Indians did in the past. So we had a perfect mapping of the skies based on these kind of things. These are called nakshatras. So I said that Earth is precessing 26,000 years, and I said, why is it important for us? Because we observed a phenomena based on what is a nakshatra at a cardinal point of astronomy. What are the cardinal points of astronomy? You've got the two solstices, winter solstice, summer solstice.
What does the word cardinal point mean?
These are the cardinal means principal point. Principal point, when the sun goes to the southernmost point, that is a principal point. It goes to the northernmost point, that's a principal point.
Gotcha.
In between, it is crossing the line, the celestial equator, and that is the equinox position. So these 4 points, that point, this point, crossing the equinox here, when you're returning crossing, these are the 4 cardinal points. So Indians always observed what was the nakshatra at a cardinal point. For example, vernal equinox has always been New Year in India. Vernal equinox, New Year point. So they'll tell you what was the nakshatra at vernal equinox point. For example, a whole lot of our literature says Kritika nakshatra was at the vernal equinox point. That is no longer true today. Today it's not Kritika anymore. So Kritika was the vernal equinox in 2400 BCE. We know that today because of a planetarium software and things like that. We can date these things. So anyway, what I'm saying is that this whole phenomena is because of precision, that the calendar shifts. When the calendar shifted, the gods were unable to perform any yajna or any such thing. They've gone to Aditi and said, help us. Aditi said, all sacrifices will begin and end with me, meaning vernal equinox will begin and end with me. This is what Aditi was saying. So we are now got to see when was the equinox, vernal equinox, at Aditi. And what is Aditi in our nakshatra model? In our nakshatra model, we have a nakshatra called Punarvashu. Punarvashu has got two stars in it, Diti and Aditi. In the Greek tradition, we call it Castor and Pollux, right?
Wow.
Castor and Pollux are Diti and Aditi, and collectively we call them Punarvashu Nakshatra. If I want to find out when was Punarvashu Nakshatra at the vernal equinox point, hold your breath. I need to crank back in the astronomy software, planetarium software, to a staggering 6000 BCE. That is 8,000 years ago, was when our ancestors were thoroughly messed up in the skies, not knowing when do I do my calendar, implying that they had a calendar 1,000 years prior to that was working, because precision works in a few thousand years is when it gets messed up. So it's got messed up to a point where they reset it to Punarvashu or Aditi. That is what it's telling us.
What is the 26,000 year
Cycle.
timeline then?
So this 26,000 years, like I said, this is the amount of time it takes for the axis of rotation of the Earth to trace this path in the sky and come back. Today we are pointing at a star called Polaris. At the other extreme is a star called Abhijit or Vega. Vega is a Greek name, Abhijit is the Indian name. It will reach Abhijit in about 15,000 years from now, 14,000 years from now. Then again come back. So that's the extent to which axis of rotation takes place. And because of that, the nakshatras which our ancestors observed, they keep changing over time. This is why I'm saying Indian astronomy is beautiful, because we have got so many astronomical phenomena in our texts which clearly are not relevant today. And we can use planetarium software and we can try to find out precisely when was something. So here you are, a date like 8,000 years ago, Indians already had a notion of a calendar, already had notions of doing these kind of measurements. I find that utterly fascinating. Let me give you one more amazing thing.
Sure.
Ranbir. This is now the familiar story we all know, right? The Surya. Surya, our stories say, there are Purana stories, Rigvedic stories that talk about this and say that Surya married Sanjana. And they had Yama, Yami, and marital bliss. One fine day, Surya got so brilliant, so bright, Sanjana could not take the heat. So she abandons her husband and she goes off to the cooler region. That's very important, cooler region. And before she leaves a shadow Chaya in her place. One fine day, Surya discovers a deception. Hey, you're not my wife. Where's my wife? And she says she's gone off to the cooler region. So off Surya also goes to the cooler region to search for her. He finds she's taken the form of a mare, a horse, and he too takes the form of a horse. And in that union, the Ashwini Kumaras are born. They're the traditional physicians, healer physicians in India, associated with horse and other such things. They're born. So simple enough story over here. And I was like, what on earth? All these kind of, people say it's a ridiculous story and all these kind of things. But for us, there are several things to take away from here. Because there is a passage in Rig Veda that says Ushas. Ushas is the goddess of dawn. Okay, she appears at dawn. Goddess of dawn is Ushas. Ushas awaken the Ashwinis for their share of the Vedic sacrifice. Such a passage is there in the Rig Veda, which you don't awaken a grown-up man. You're awaken babies, right? So, and the point is that at dawn, Ashwinis are appearing over there, which means along with the sun, Ashwins must appear. Additionally, we know because Surya went to the cooler region, it should be winter solstice in the northern hemisphere because it's gone to southernmost point, which means we are looking for a phenomena when Ashwins are appearing at dawn and it is winter solstice. If you crank this back in time, it turns out to be 7,200 BCE. Staggering amount of time, right? That is when you find that Ashwins appear with the sun at winter solstice point and they're rising.
What was Ashwin's Astronomy-wise?
Astronomy-wise, there is a Beta Delphini. That's a Western name. So we can identify the stars. I might be mistaken.
It's two stars, basically.
It is two stars,
Wow.
twin stars, and they're tiny stars, not very
Damn.
bright. So,
I don't know why I'm getting goosebumps, but I'm getting goosebumps.
but the punchline is not here. The punchline is not in the antiquity of 7,200 BC. This was identified by, again, Balagangadhar Tilak. He identified it. 100 years ago, he's been talking about it. And Abhyankar also talked about it about 20, 30 years ago. And
Why is no one talking about it in 2023?
I'll tell you, I've been talking about this for the last 10 years or so. In my talks, I've been talking about Ashwin. You'll be shocked, Ranveer. 2 years back, two papers came out in the journal called Nature, in Science, Nature, right? Two papers came out 2022 or 2021, I think 2022. That blew my mind again. The reason is because I got an independent corroboration of what I'm telling you through scientific papers. These papers, two of them, one of them said there was a solar flare that happened about 9,000 years ago, precisely 7176 BCE. I had dated to 7200 BCE. Their date was 7176 BCE. There was a massive solar flare that hit the Earth. And this solar flare was so big that the graphs in the paper showed completely out of whack. Let me give you a backstory over here. Normally, we always, the sun has got 11-year sunspot cycle, right? When sunspots go to a maximum, you find a lot of them. I mean, you can take a telescope with a solar filter and you can see it. Easily you can see it. And I have seen that right now we're going to a maximum again. And 2 years back, almost smooth. You don't see any solar sunspots. Whenever we have sunspots, there's a propensity for the sun to have a coronal mass ejection, CME event. That is when charged particles are thrown out of the sun, right? And if we are unlucky, it comes through towards the Earth. Normally, we are okay because we got the magnetic lines of force, and these are all charged particles. So they conducted away to the North Pole, South Pole by our magnetic lines. And typically what happens is they interact in the upper atmosphere, and there's all kind of isotopic activity that takes place, radioactivity that takes place
the northern
at the North Pole and South Pole.
Wow.
That is why we get aurora borealis. All the northern lights, southern lights are because of that activity.
Gotcha.
And typically those radioactive particles rain down on the Earth in these polar regions, and they're preserved in the ice. They're preserved in the ice. Normally, it is not a point for contention. Typically, satellites are concerned with there'll be damage, radio communication damage, no biggie. The biggest solar flare we have in recorded history goes back approximately, I think, 1856 or so. It's called the Carrington event. If you Google for Carrington event, you'll find that. This was such a big solar flare at that time that Earth was so ionized, not only in the polar region. Normally you see aurora borealis about a few latitudes to the north from the North Pole. This northern light was seen up to Hawaii, up to China. That's how far these lights had come. It was that powerful a storm.
Damn.
Not only that, there were operators in the United States in Portland, those days telegraph lines, right? Did Morse code. So they were operating the telegraph lines from Portland to Boston without turning on the power. Because the lines had become so ionized, telegraph lines had been so ionized, the current flowing, they're happily doing that Morse code. This happened for 2 days. Over a period of 2 days, the Earth was so ionized. And this is the biggest event we know. And people are saying in Australia, people used to read newspapers at night without lights. That's the amount of light that you had with this event. Now, with this as a backstory, let us go back to this earlier event. Scientists are estimating this 7176 BC to be an order of magnitude bigger than Carrington event, logarithmically 10 times larger. And this they have found by drilling the ice cores in Antarctica, ice cores in Greenland. It's like a time capsule, right? These ice cores. You can take it to the lab, slice it little by little, and you can study the isotopes like beryllium and half-life of these things. From the half-life, you can now estimate how far back in time. These guys have drawn graphs in this Nature paper off the charts. Suddenly, in 7176 BC, all these numbers are off the charts. When I saw that, I said, my God, this is exactly what I've been talking. Indians remember Surya became brilliant for a period of time. Probably the solar proton event was so great that it ionized the Earth so much. Anywhere you see, you might have seen brilliance. It's like a haze that you see in places, right? If you can imagine a bright haze, anywhere you look, it might have been like that because
the sun was brighter.
sun was brighter, hotter, and that happened probably for a period of time, maybe a few weeks and at a time.
I got to dial you back to the story. Who was the sun's wife?
Sanjana.
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 Sanjana was the goddess of, or was it just?
I don't remember she's a goddess, but the story says that Sanjana was Surya's wife, and because the sun was so brilliant, she leaves him and goes away to the Kolar region, and he follows her over there.
I'm sorry, my curiosity is making me want to Google what Sanjana was the goddess of.
Sanjana's
Because there's got to be some metaphor in there as well.
precisely, and Sanjana's father is Vishwakarma.
Goddess of clouds and twilight.
There you go.
So clouds and twilight went away from the sun. The twilight left the sun.
Right, which means brilliant, all the time brilliant. No protection, no shade, no protection. So
I'll give you another Hinduism angle to this story. You know the chaya she left behind, the shadow she left behind?
right.
The sun had a baby with that shadow, and that baby is called Shani.
Right. Yes.
Which is Saturn.
Saturn, yes.
Makes me think that what was the shadow then? Or what was
Yeah, relevance.
what's the
over
relevance
there.
of the shadow?
We'll come back to that.
Okay.
But let me finish this episode.
Go on.
So after this, when I saw this mind-blowing story that is a perfect collaboration. Here, I gave you 7,200 by reading the astronomy. By looking at the astronomy, we call the date to be precisely around 7200 BC, plus and minus 80 years, this side and that side. That's when Ashwins are with heliacal rising with the sun at winter solstice. That is what the story has said. That is what the Rig Veda story has said. We've merely followed the formula and we have got this date. And this date has been known to Tilak for 100 years ago. And for the last 10 years, I've been popularizing this in my talks and so on. 2 years ago, this paper comes out. And I say, whoa, this is a complete collaboration of what I've been talking about. And another paper too came out. The second paper said, looking at the tree rings, they're apparently able to get the tree ring records. And they're saying there was a massive proton event exactly the same time, 7176 BCE. So here you are. 9,000 years ago, whoever was living in India, our ancestors, have gone through a massive proton event and remembered that in a story.
Yeah, okay. I got to pause you a little bit here and give some millennial perspective.
Okay.
Grew up reading a lot of Amar Chitra Katha. And I remember reading about this exact story about Usha and
Sanjana.
all this stuff. I remember it was a family, and even Yamraj is a part of that family.
Yes,
yes,
Yama, Yami are part of the earlier family. Yes.
So yeah, he's got, I think with Sanjana he has kids,
Yes.
and then with the
Yes. Yama, Yami with Sanjana.
right.
Yes.
Yama is the god of death.
Yes. And the story is amazing for one more reason. Yama limps and Yami shivers. It could be a remembrance that when this radioactivity happened, these are all cancer causing. Beryllium is massively cancer causing. Maybe it impacted the youth. Maybe youth were bedridden and so on. And the story remembers Yama is limping, not able to walk properly. He's a god of death in addition. And Yami is shivering and that kind of a thing. I'm just saying it's possible. It's possible.
Yeah. I'll tell you my perspective. I remember reading that story, being very fascinated by all these Amar Chitra Katha stories. So I'm separating Mahabharata and Ramayana from this because I, in my heart, believe that those events have also happened. And those are actual human stories.
Right.
Things have happened in our past.
Right.
But when it comes to these stories, where we're talking about the sun being married to the goddess of twilight, this was also written in Amar Chitra Katha.
Right.
And I remember my mum reading out the story to me from the comic book. And then I asked her, are these people, are these aliens? Are these like some other higher beings? And she didn't really have an answer. And I remember my question mark just stopping there. Cut to 2023 and I've got my answer.
Yes.
That these are celestial events.
Yes. Our ancestors
Encapsulated in
remembered.
stories.
Yes.
The stories traveled from 7000 BC.
Yes, 9,000 years to present
2001 when I
Yes.
read that Amar Chitra Katha
Right.
comic book.
time. Right.
And this is one story.
Right.
How many other stories are relaying how much of our past?
Absolutely. That's what I go around saying all the time, that our stories have got so much metaphoric content. If we have the key to unlock that wisdom, we know what that wisdom is.
How far are we in unlocking these stories, according to you, like in terms of percentage?
Very poor. Because we have a tendency today to have a pedestrian understanding only. We have dismissed this as myth, right? A very negative word, myth, because we fail to see the metaphoric, the philosophical wisdoms in these stories. Our first tendency is to say they are primitive people. We are the most advanced of times, and these are primitive people. They don't realize that 9,000 years ago, their ancestors had the same cranial capacity. Hey, today you use an iPhone, but that is no mark of civilization or progress as such. You're a blind user of an iPhone. You don't know how it works, what's behind it, most people at least. They don't know what is behind it. So how does that make you technologically more advanced than that man over there? He didn't have an iPhone, but he wasn't perfectly in control of his nature and abstract thought and everything else. So we should not attribute an early man as being primitive to a point where he was making stories like this. These stories are woven intentionally. Intentionally, they were done to encode knowledge. If I were to tell you, for example, Ranveer, here's the theorem A, theorem B, learn this theorem, learn that theorem. The minute the class is over, you're going to forget all about it. I mean, so dry and you can't take it. But the minute I have an infotainment over there, I add a bit of entertainment. See, our rishis understood our minds crave for entertainment. Even today, 1 minute you're on Twitter, 1 minute you're on Instagram, 1 minute you're on Facebook, 1 minute you're there, because you want to be entertained all the time. A shot here, this one there, that one there, and so on. Rishis understood that. And so they put entertainment over here, along with the story metaphor over there. So these stories, like you correctly said, they have passed on to us for 9,000 years, and they're still alive, and they still speak to us.
All a human needs is food, shelter, clothing, and stories.
And stories, entertainment. You're a happy man if you have that.
Really makes me think about all the other celestial events, events from ancient history, events from prehistory that are actually tailored into Indian culture. And even now, you are right in saying a big section of the Indian population looks down upon this
Right.
in urban India,
Right,
not so much in the interiors of the country.
Pedestrian understanding of these events. So they dismiss it as myth. It's a reflection of their ignorance rather than attempt to creatively, intellectually decode what their ancestors meant.
I'll tell you what questions are arising in my head. I do kind of again want to talk about the younger Dryas impact theory that we spoke about, and then bring you to Vishnu Puran about Vishnu's first avatar, which was the Matsya avatar, and the other events
Right.
in that Vishnu Puran timeline.
Right.
When you actually study the 10 avatars,
Right.
etc.
Right.
Part of me now definitely believes that even if those stories didn't take place on Earth, it's a metaphor used to describe celestial events.
True.
Makes me wonder what that whole churning of the ocean story is.
Right. So yes, I wondered about this churning of the ocean too. But you talk to the Dryas event, the younger Dryas event. So let's go to that.
Sure.
So we got the last glacial maximum approximately 22,000 to 18,000 years ago.
So you'll have to explain what a glacial maximum is.
Okay. So Earth has gone through ice ages.
Yeah.
We know that there have been periods of ice ages, periods of drought. And you might wonder, why is it happening? Well, Milankovitch was a Serbian scientist in the 1920s who linked this up with the movements of Earth. In other words, we know Earth is rotating. No biggie, we know that. Earth is going around the sun. No biggie, we know that also. In addition to that, Earth is doing three more things. One is, its orbit around the sun is going from elliptical to slightly circular. Circular to elliptical, circular to elliptical. And this is happening in a periodicity of about 100,000 years.
What that effectively means for non-mathematics grads is that Earth is going close and far from the sun.
You can think of it,
like wobbling.
yes. But not significantly, but they say
Just
that,
a little bit.
yes.
But the thing is, even
that
if
is
it
enough.
goes
That is enough.
just a little bit, it will
yes.
alter temperatures heavily.
Exactly. The second one it is doing is that axial precession we talked about, where the axis of rotation takes 26,000 years to complete. That is the second one. The third one is Earth's tilt. It goes from 21 degrees to 24 degrees, and this happens at 41,000 years. So we got 3 additional cycles now.
What is Earth's tilt?
the tilt. We are tilted now at 23 degrees, right? Our axis appears to be tilted. As we are going around the sun, it looks like, see this tilt in my arm?
Oh, okay. Taking the North Pole and the South Pole
Yes.
as a reference?
So yes. It appears that we are tilted.
Okay.
Just like Uranus appears to be on its floor, things like that. So it appears to be going and is tilted and so on. So you have Earth's tilt going from 21 degrees to 24 degrees, and this happens at 41,000 years. So 3 cycles I talked about: 100,000 years circular to elliptical. Second one is the axial precession, 26,000 years. Third one, the tilt. This is around 41,000 years. Milankovitch did not discover these. These things were seen by others. His contribution is the addition of these 3 cycles results in the amount of radiant energy the Earth gets from the sun. Okay?
As in, you put these figures into some mathematical formula?
You'll figure out how much of radiant energy is coming.
Radiant energy means intensity of light?
Yes, the sunlight. How much of sunlight we're getting, the northern horizon, the northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, how much we're getting.
And sunlight might be measured through the total quantity of photons.
The flux, the amount of flux we're getting, solar flux we're getting. There are other ways to do it. But bottom line, he said the ice ages and the drought periods of Earth are related to these 3 cycles. One of the most successful scientific theories to the present day, because you go and drill in the ice core in Greenland or Antarctica, it fits this prediction so beautifully. So we know that's true. So we know through these cycles that 22,000 to 18,000 years ago, Earth went through an ice age. And this ice age is called the last glacial maximum. And this resulted in so much of water locked up in ice that the shorelines are visible far beyond where they are today.
I'm going to ask you a very rookie question here. Have you seen the animated movie Ice Age? You've seen it, right?
Love the squirrel.
Yeah, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's the reference point for 2 generations when it comes to the ice. Or I would go as far as saying 4-5 generations. Know about the Ice Age from those animated films.
Right.
Draw out a picture of the Ice Age for people who've not seen the animated movie. In terms of what was the Earth like then?
Yes.
I would also go as far as saying what was the equatorial region around the Earth like then.
Right. So there is a diversity of opinions among geologists. There is an unpopular opinion that Earth was an ice ball. The whole Earth was a slushy ice ball. That's a very unpopular opinion, but there are some people who predict that. But then some people estimate using the climate models that the glaciers had come to a fairly large extent. In India, Himalayas, maybe even beyond the Himalayas, maybe up to New Delhi and others, maybe we had ice ages over here.
What is a glacier?
Glacier is the ice pack that we have that seems to grow over time. If you have more of cooler periods, it eventually keeps growing over time. For example, Gangotri, we have a glacier over there.
Correct my science here. Okay. My assumption is that when you totally lower the temperature of the Earth, which is what is happening in an ice age, gradually, what ends up happening is a lot of the water vapor starts collecting and forming ice.
Right.
That is how glacier
Eventually
increases.
Begins. Yes.
So effectively, Earth was also a lot taller.
Right. Yeah, I guess I could say that ice pack was growing.
As in there was a layer of ice that grew around the Earth.
Right.
My assumption has always been that in a place as hot as, say, Tamil Nadu. Okay, I've been to Tamil Nadu, and you need to experience the heat in Tamil Nadu in the summer to really understand how hot India can get.
Yes.
Even that part had...
Like I said, unpopular opinion. Some people say even in the equatorial region we had ice. That's a minority. There's a book there called Snowball Earth, where the geologist is discussing why he thinks that was the case. But then we are talking about the last glacial maximum that is not as severe as earlier ice ages. Earlier ice ages were even more severe. So this was not that severe, this particular ice age we're talking about.
And what is the frequency of them?
Like I said, the 3 cycles, right? The eccentricity cycle, precision cycle, tilt cycle. By adding the impact of those 3 things, people can predict when they will come.
But
so
are they at equal?
No.
It's random a little bit.
Because of the cycle. It's when the periodicities resonate, right? The resonance has got to build up. Because sometimes it could be out of phase. If you're out of phase, then the impact is not much. But when all 3 add up, with resonances between them, that's when you'll have an impact, either cold impact or a heat impact, one of the two things.
So over millions of years,
Right.
you're able to predict, "Acha, in
Right.
this phase will be an ice
Right.
age, in this
Right.
phase."
Right. Precisely.
And there are also warming periods and cooling periods.
Precisely. All are can be predicted with these kind of cycles.
And we're currently in a warming period.
That's what we have found. Yes, we are in a family hockey stick kind of rise. Yes, we are in a warming period right now.
And we're making it way worse because of using fossil fuels.
Human activities.
Deforestation.
There are people who are politically torn by this whole thing. Some people saying it is a natural consequence of Earth's cycles, whereas others are saying it has accelerated since the Industrial Revolution because of human activity. So we are in the Holocene extinction event right now.
This is almost a controversial conversation, you know. Like, I know how controversial this conversation can get. I'm all for the environment. I strongly believe that our actions are causing a lot of harm to the environment. It's visible to the human eye.
Right.
If you go out in my balcony now versus even 2 years ago, there's so much more haze. There's so much more smog. Of course, we are damaging the environment.
Right.
Like as Joe Root said, who is the former England cricket team captain, he said that when I was playing in Mumbai, it felt like I was eating the air. So there's no way that our actions are not adding to global warming, according to me.
Very true. There's a paper that came out from scientists, 15,000 scientists in 2017 or 18. They gave a 2-page paper with only graphs. In each graph, the depletion of the forest cover and the dead zones in the sea, where there's no life in the sea, and the forest cover, ozone pack, like this, they had about 15 to 20 indicators. Every one of them is down. Every one of them showing indicators going down, and they had promoted that it's urgent, we should go to a plant-based diet. The sooner we do that, the better for the environment. And obviously, reducing fertility also. That was a recommendation.
Also, when you pinch and poke and punch Mother Nature this much, it's going to pinch and poke and punch you back at some point.
The Gaia model, Earth is alive, and she will respond in a way to do that.
And you feel it.
You see, in the Vedanta concept, everything has got consciousness. Everything is part of Brahman. If everything is part of Brahman, there is some amount of consciousness here, and maybe a growing amount of consciousness as you go to humans and so on, self-awareness and consciousness. So this is part of who we think we are. There is consciousness everywhere, including the earth. And yes, there will be a reaction eventually. But we are digressing from the last glacial maximum.
Let's talk about the Ice Age, good sir.
Last glacial maximum.
I just think, these warming periods, cooling periods, narratives are important to understand the Ice Age better.
Precisely. Yes, indeed. So 22,000 to 18,000 years ago, we had this maximum of this last glacial maximum, meaning most of the water was locked up in ice, and it's estimated that the sea levels were 125 meters lower than where they are today. That's approximately 400 feet. Can you imagine? 125 meters lower. That's where the water level was.
That means continents were larger.
Right. And now is a fascinating thing. There's a professor called Ramaswamy, S.M. Ramaswamy in Bharatidasan University in Tiruchirappalli. He published a paper 2 or 3 years back saying that he had used remotely operated vehicles and sonar in the Bay of Bengal. Not just anywhere, but he was wanting to find out what is below on the Bay of Bengal, 15 kilometers outside the present shoreline, 125 meters below. He has found man-made structures there.
Did they date it?
Yes. Well, he's taken many radio samples, but I'm telling you from last glacial maximum, when could it have been possible that humans were living 125 meters below the sea, right? This is only possible during the last glacial maximum when all over the world, sea level was lower by 125 meters. And he's taking pictures. You can see his paper where looks to be a man-made harbor. That is fascinating. Why would people need harbor 18,000 years ago? Who were they trading with? What were they trading with? What kind of ships were they? No iron. How were they building these things?
Explain this point further. The reverse of this is Dwarka getting engulfed by the sea.
I will come to that. So Professor Ramaswamy, he's saying he's got a lot of artifacts, taken carbon dating. I think the results are not published yet, but he thinks that these are going back around 18,000 years. He's saying the shape of the harbor seems to be a technology that has moved northwards. He's saying Dwaraka's shape of the harbor and everything seems to be similar to what is found here.
I didn't understand
So,
this.
so he's saying the harbor shape and other such things seem to be similar here and in Dwaraka. But
Oh,
Dwaraka now is later dated by more than 10,000 years later, right?
I also
So,
just want to mention about Dwarka to our listeners. We had someone from the special forces of the Navy, of the Indian Navy. It's called the Marcos,
right.
whose job was to dive deep
Wow.
and investigate Dwarka. So this has been found by the Marcos of the Indian
Wonderful.
military. Anyway, now go on, sir.
My understanding of let me finish Bharatidasan's university work. So they have found man-made harbors over there, clearly showing to us that human activity was there in the coastal regions in India in a very ancient period of time, and we have evidence of coastal civilizations. Not only this is the Pumpuhar, not today's Pumpuhar, but 18,000 years ago that could have been Pumpuhar. And on Dwaraka, again, we know from Mahabharata that after Arjuna got the Yadava women out, turns around and Dwaraka sunk under the sea. We know that in 2003, there was National Institute of Oceanography from Chennai. They sent a ship with sonar equipment and things like that to Gulf of Cambay because they wanted to lay an internet submarine line. So they're mapping the ocean floor. In the process of mapping, in that paper, they have reported that they found a 9 kilometer long structure that seems to be like a seawall. They said looks man-made. A lot of controversy on that, saying it's natural or not, but it looks like a seawall running for 9 kilometers. They dredged up a piece of wood, carbon dated in Germany, Hanover, as well as in Hyderabad, and they came with a date of around 9,000 years before present for that piece of wood. Promptly, the people saying big deal, so what, and those kind of things. But there are associations with perhaps Dwaraka. And I don't fully buy it because my belief is Dwaraka is around 150 kilometers out from where they were looking. If you look at Bet Dwaraka, where it is and where today's Dwaraka is, my belief is it's off over there. There's some reasons why I think so, and I've forgotten entirely how to argue that, but I wrote it down at some point. So it's out in the sea. Anyway, we are finding artifacts. We are finding artifacts in coastal civilizations. Here's a fascinating part, Ranveer. We have stories that talk about in Tamil Nadu, in Tamil people have got memories of a Sangam period. A Sangam period that lasted about 10,000 years ago. They think there were three Sangam periods are literary periods. They believe there are three Sangam periods. The earliest one was almost 10,000 years ago. It happened in a place they call Ten Madurai. Ten Madurai means southern Madurai. Okay, some place over there. Second period was another 3,000 years, a literary period. Then they believe that the entire thing was submerged.
And this is written in.
It is the cultural memory of the Tamil people. So many people have memory of this going to the past and talking about this. And this entire Ten Madurai was submerged. And the third literary period took place in the present Madurai, which is northern Madurai, literally. So Tamil people preserve a memory of lands that have been lost.
Oof.
The Tamil nationalists promptly said Kumari Kandam, that is stretching from Madagascar to Australia to India. I don't think that is true because
You'll have to give context here.
Okay. So in late 1900s, early 1900s, when people did not know about plate tectonics are the ones that matter for continental shaping and those kinds of things. The Western scientists were interested in knowing why do we have the same fossils in different continents. The lemurs are popular in Madagascar, but what are the lemurs doing in India? How is that possible? So they presumed that it was a land bridge through which these things had come about. And the Tamil nationalists promptly said that there must have been land connected from Madagascar to southern India to Australia. And that's remembered the Sangam period, land submerged. I don't think that is true because I have looked through Google Earth. If you can go to Google Earth and look at the depth of the water, just outside continental shelf of India, the depth falls to 3 kilometers, 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers. There's no way we had land even during the last glacial maximum. Last glacial maximum is our reference because water level was 125 meters below, right? So any land that is 125 meters and above is candidates for the submerged land. That thermal memory is there. And that does not extend to continent wide, but it extends about 90 kilometers from the present shoreline. 90 kilometers from the present shoreline, we had land. And so Tamil memory is preserving that. There were coastal civilizations here. That is all sunken during the earth warming up, ice ages going up, and rather water levels going up.
Just like how where we are sitting, Mumbai, it's probably going to be underwater in 200 years.
Easily possible, very possible. And I think that's a prediction, in fact. You don't have to wait that long. If the predictions are right, it could happen in 2050. In 2050, we could have water levels. Chennai could be submerged. Kolkata and Bangladesh, many places could be submerged. In this side, Mumbai also could suffer a lot of submergence events. And Florida in the US, that could suffer submergence events. So people are predicting that. I mean, given that they said the doomsday scenario is if the average temperature of the earth goes up by 1.5 degrees compared to industrial revolution. Guess what? In 2023, we broke the record many times. All over the world, we broke this record of 1.5 average centigrade. We broke it many times. If this is a recurring event into the future, I think we're in for some pretty bad weather.
Apocalyptic floods.
Precisely. It could very much happen.
I mean, if we truly open our eyes, apocalyptic natural events are already happening around us.
Right.
But we're just oblivious. Or we're just escaping it.
We don't make the connections. We live in the moment, but we don't have memory to connect the events and have a dynamical picture.
I don't remember so many floods, so many storms, so many earthquakes happening this frequently when I was a child.
Right.
Maybe earthquakes I'll separate from that argument, but at least when we're talking about flash floods, whatever's happening in the Himalayas, this is nature biting back. We just need to open our eyes and notice.
Right.
Anyway.
So you asked me what is my notion of history. All this was my deep history. Early on, you asked me what is a deep history. And I said it goes back so much of time. Now I'm talking 18,000 years ago. We had people living here and we got cultural memory in the south of lands that have been lost. The lost lands would have been around the late glaciers. One more ice age, mini ice age called late glacial maximum. The last glacial is 22 to 18,000 years ago. The late glacial is around 12,000 years.
Younger Dryas.
That's Younger Dryas period. Yes, that's a Younger Dryas.
Because I believe, I don't know the exact science behind this, but basically when that meteor hit Earth around 12,000 years ago, it created a massive dust cloud in the air.
Right.
It's as if you're shooting a bullet into a big ball of sand. The dust cloud stayed, blocked off sunlight. The lack of sunlight cooled down the earth heavily for a long time. And this is what Randall Carlson's research is also based on. He spoke about studying the effect of the glaciers from this period on the geography of North America, which is very close to where the impact happened. Which apparently happened in the Gulf of Mexico. So he's done multiple podcasts with Joe Rogan talking about how they've tracked the movement of the glaciers in North America, etc.
Very interesting. When did we last see something like this? In the Indian context, now brace yourself, 74,000 years ago.
As in?
74,000.
What did we see?
We had a Mount Toba, an event, a super volcano in Sumatra, referred to as Mount Toba. Indonesia. This was so big and was aimed towards India. It put so much of particulate matter on the earth that India and Pakistan were covered by 5 meters of ash. Can you imagine this? 5 meters of ash. Even today, if you go to Jwalapuram is in Kurnool district in Andhra Pradesh, there's a researcher called Ravi Korisetta. He's published some works on this. He has discovered the ash layer from the 75,000 years ago. He's found human artifacts below the ash layer, then the ash layer, human artifacts above the ash layer, showing India was populated before this event and after. But
5 meters of ash.
5 meters of ash.
It's like my engineering hostel room. Anyway, go on.
But the point is that it put so much of particulate matter, it caused an instant 6-year nuclear winter. It caused a mini thousand...
What is a nuclear winter?
Nuclear winter. Yes. So this is the concept that we have in our apocalyptic view. If you have nuclear explosions and things of that nature, there'll be so much of matter in the air, the dust and other such things floating around the earth and so on, prevents the sunlight from coming in, cooling down. It's a winter happening over there. But this caused 1,000 year winter over here, and they estimate that the breeding adults fell to 10,000.
What?
The number of adults who are alive after that event
All over the earth.
all over in India, because in this empty DNA studies, they presume that all the non-African people of the world have originated in India through two lineages called M and N markers. And so what I'm telling you now is related to that. After this Mount Toba event happened in 74,000 years ago, they estimate less than 10,000 adults were there on Earth, on this region, from whom we have all come. If this theory is right, you and I are alive because one of our ancestors were there who survived that event.
It's not just you and me, but it's also Cristiano Ronaldo,
Everybody.
Wayne Rooney,
Everybody.
LeBron, not LeBron James, because technically he's of African descent.
Right.
According to this theory.
According to this theory, yes. All the non-African populations have come from these people.
Okay.
So amazing theory. But we are seeing this. What you said is about this Crandall's theory, about we are seeing this again and again. Krakatoa was a massive volcano that happened in Sumatra 1800, so I'm not mistaken, 1880 or something like that. That also put so much of particulate matter in the skies, and we've had problems. 600 current era, one more massive volcano happened, and I'm trying to link that up with what happened in India. We had droughts over here, and can we see that regimes have changed? The Chalukyas came at that time. There were other powers that faded away. Powers that were there for 1,000 years, suddenly fading away, and a new power coming over there without a war or any such thing. The only thing is that there must have been so much of unrest and problems with no crops growing because of nuclear kind of winter kind of.
Do you think there's anything mentioned about this 75,000-year-old ice age that we spoke about? The Sumatra explosion?
So if there is, we have not yet found it. We have not decoded it. There's so much in our Vedic literature, including the Vedas themselves. There's so much over there that these are all metaphoric content. Nobody can take the Vedas and do a word-for-word translation and hope to get meaning out of it. Not going to happen.
There's a lot to be decoded in the Vedas.
Precisely. It's got to be interpreted. And the question is, what is it encoding? What is it information encoded over there? We have no idea, some of it. But I believe an event of this magnitude would have been remembered through time, and maybe somewhere an echo of it would be there.
Okay. So we've almost reached the end of this conversation, sir.
Good.
You know what I will definitely say is that I adore talking to archaeologists as well, but for different reasons. As I said at the start of the episode, often I feel like professions and professional guidelines make you think within a certain boundary, which is important for that craft.
Right.
Because archaeologists, the job that they do is they go into the field with an open mindset. Right. They'll search for evidence first and foremost.
Right. So the methodology is important. Yeah. What kind of methodology they follow? They got to follow the prescriptions in that field. Right.
So the conversations I end up having with them are very different. Sometimes it's about the texture of the things that they find. Right. It's about how far we've dug into the earth. The only issue with that is that it limits room for conversations about thought experiments. So many of the conversations we've had today, I won't say are exactly thought experiments, but it's a more expansive thought based on ancient scripture. Perhaps my last question on this entire show for you would be another thought experiment related to the Younger Dryas impact theory. Okay. Now, that was supposedly a very important cataclysmic event in the history of the earth.
Yes.
I remember Joe Rogan and Randall Carlson both saying that even that reduced the human population heavily. It was almost like a reboot of civilization. So let's place ourselves in a situation where a meteor is about to hit the earth. Right now we have cameras, we have mics, we have electricity, we have the internet. People take the internet for granted. The internet is a series of wires under the earth.
Absolutely, yes.
Even that's going to get wrecked because of a meteor hitting the earth. Our technology is going to get wrecked. Lots of people that we know around us are going to die. The human population will be reduced. It'll be apocalyptic. There will be a nuclear winter.
Mhm.
It'll be exactly like those apocalyptic movies that you see.
Right.
And when you have kids, say you survive,
Mm.
you'll have to learn survival skills in the same way that Bear Grylls
True.
does on his show, etc.
True.
You'll begin from a little bit of a hunter-gatherer mindset. That's what your life will become if there's truly an apocalyptic event.
Right.
Now, we know for a fact that the apocalyptic event happened in 10,000 BC, roughly.
Around that time frame, yeah.
The effects of it were there for a while after that. We had to restart civilization. That is my theory against the archaeologists that claim that because the Indus Valley civilization was not that advanced.
Okay.
That's what the theory is. That the kind of art that we see, the kind of architecture that we see, they weren't capable of the televisions that we hear about in the Mahabharata, the aeroplanes that we hear about in the Ramayana.
Right.
That's the theory. That we have proof about the Indus Valley civilization. My angle on this is that even if technology advanced a lot before 10,000 BC, it was all crushed to nothing because of the Younger Dryas impact.
Right.
And then we had to restart from there. And what we see in the Indus Valley civilization is 8,000 years roughly post the Younger Dryas impact. So we had to rebuild. That's why, yes, I know the Indus Valley civilization had that whole drainage system. It had governance and all that. And there's still so much we don't understand about it.
Right.
But it was a reboot of Indian civilization. We are taught that it was the beginning of the Indian civilization.
Right.
Do you have anything to say about what I said?
Absolutely. So many thoughts. Some are speculative, some we have evidence, or we have informed opinions on some things. For example, remember I told you about the Carrington event, 1856 or so. Such a big solar flare is known to have hit the Earth. They say if that magnitude flare hit the Earth today, life would stop existing the way you understand it for at least 2 years. It says every telephone line, every power line would be gone. Transformers would have exploded. And so you'll have no electricity anywhere in the world. And all your satellites will be gone. All your communication will be gone. All your beautiful internet streaming, Netflix, everything gone. And you wouldn't have this. It'll take the Earth 2 years to recover. That's the amount of time it'll take to ramp up the factories, again get the transformers, again repair power all over the world. So you can imagine that kind of apocalypse is not only because of Meteor. The sun can easily do it to you.
And
easily do it.
We can't predict that, right?
We can't predict that. This happened, we know, this big event happened in 1800s. It could happen anytime. Anytime it could have a huge solar flare, and modern technological life as we understand it today would have gone. With that in mind, I often tell people, think about this. Western Europe was a backward, primitive place for a long time. After they adopted Christianity in Constantine Christianity 330 current era, they chucked out all the Greek knowledge, Greek philosophy, which was all India looking, right? Vedanta looking. They chucked them out as pagans, and they became a theocracy, a church theocracy where they had an orthodoxy over there, feudal kind of government. You're not allowed to think, right? You had to be a sheep, follow the shepherd kind of a thing. They had this going till 1500. 1500, if you see my talks, you'll understand how they ramped up on knowledge from India and all those kind of things. And they were primed for the so-called Renaissance, right? They're primed for that. And the so-called age of rationalism and things like that, when they started learning things from Indian knowledge. I often tell people as a thought experiment, these guys who didn't even have place value addition, subtraction, multiplication, they learned only 1550 from India. From the time of Newton in 1600s till today, they managed to go from nothing to sending a spaceship to Jupiter, to Mars and other such places. So it's 600 years. That is all it took. From zero to understanding Bernoulli's principle of lift, to building Wright brothers aircraft, to building these huge rockets that can have enough impulse to take you out to outer space and things like that. 600 years. I ask the question often, how many 600-year cycles do we have in the past? Where maybe not pervasively like we know today, but maybe in some aspect of technology, where you went to great heights and lost it all. Of course, a rational thinking person will ask, where are the artifacts? I want to find a fossil, I want to find a remain. And intriguingly, time to time, we find these things. One of them is the Antikythera. The Antikythera was a mechanism found in early 1900s off the seas in Greece, Mediterranean Sea. They found it. Intricate hearing mechanism. We know that because we can X-ray this and find out intricate mechanism that seems to be some kind of a celestial clock. It shouldn't belong to that period. That kind of mechanism and that kind of computation should not belong to that period of time. But it is there. So like this, time to time, we find something says, whoa, what is this? For example, the so-called Agastya battery, where descriptions are given on how we can make electrolyte and have some kind of insulator, and there's a potential difference, and you can make a current out of that. It doesn't belong to the period if we believe in linear growth of science, but it is there. So I often ask the question, how many 600 period cycles do we have going back 10,000 years, 20,000 years?
Yeah.
Very possible.
Yeah.
So I'm open to this. I'm not closed my mind to this.
I think one of the things I would like to teach my own children about history is about the impact of nature on history. This is one thing I've learned as a very macro lesson on the show. We've had an archaeologist, Dr. Prabhakar, who's actually explored the pyramids as well. Where even inside the pyramids, they had found a battery. And he had spoken about it on the show.
I've heard about this. Yes.
So, and this is a qualified archaeologist speaking. You know, my point is that even the ancient Egyptians didn't believe that they were the ancient Egyptians. They felt they were the modern Egyptians. And the ancient Egyptian culture was from almost 100,000 years ago. This is the kind of history I'd want to tell my children about, not just the history that we read in our history textbooks.
Right.
And with that, sir, that's the episode for today.
It's wonderful. It's been an excellent discussion. And Ranveer, thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure talking all these subjects.
Pleasure speaking to you, sir. I want the Indian narrative on this. I hate calling it alternative history because it's not.
It's not.
Deep history.
Deep history. That's the word. Deep history. It's not prehistory. It's not proto-history. It is deep history we're talking about.
History that's studied with more of an open mind.
Right.
Of course, there's room for error, even in our conversations.
Right.
We're doing many thought experiments in our conversations, but this is the exact kind of conversation that leads to archaeological findings. You have to be suggestive, at least while you're talking about what could have been.
It's like I say, if you break these chains of 1500 BC Aryan invasion and throw them away, the shackles are out of your mind, then this is what I meant. So many things are there in the Indian context. We can reconcile them without any problem to the ancient past. Like, for example, we talked about science 8000 BC, 9000 BC. Well, we got carbon dating from Saraswati Sindhu civilization. Birana, the oldest dates are 9,000 years before present. Happy reconciliation of astronomy and radiocarbon dating. But anyway, it's been a pleasure talking all these things with you, Ranveer.
Raj Vedam, sir. Love how much of a deep history nerd you are, just like myself. It's just two nerdy engineering grads.
Absolutely.
Breaking down some deep history.
Nerds, that's who we are.
Yeah, that's the key to life and happiness and love sometimes. I don't know why I said that. Thank you for being on the show, sir. Appreciate you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That was the episode for today. And this is exactly the kind of conversation I crave both in life and on TRS. We're always looking for guest recommendations from you guys. I know how much you'll enjoy these historical and cultural conversations. Tell me what you thought about this conversation as well. And please do send in some epic guest recommendations. TRS will be back soon. 2 episodes are releasing every week. And the knowledge download, ladies and gentlemen, has only just begun. We'll see you very, very soon.